We're going to take a look now at the Sugya on Daf Yud Aleph, and we're holding in Yalkut Bi'urim on page Pei Gimel, towards the bottom of the right column. Gemara says on the top of Yud Aleph, Omid Aleph, Rav Ashi Sover Lokir Reish Lakish, which means that there's an Easter Kares with regard to the other Achim, other than the Choletz. Only the Choletz is reduced from a Chiv Kares down to a Chiv Lav. Umitaritz Law Kirab Shimon. Now let's understand what Mitaritz Law Kirab Shimon means. For that, we have to review the Gemara on Daf Yud Amid Beis, in which we have Esvei Rab Yochanan L'Reish Lakish. We had a brisa that apparently contradicted Reish Lakish, and that was the brisa that Rab Yochanan quoted. And you'll see this approximately 10 lines up before the end of Yud Amid Beis. So again, we're studying Yud Amid Beis in order to get to Yud Aleph Amid Aleph. And the brisa says, "Hacholetz liavimto v'chaza v'kitcha umeis, tzricha chalitza min ha'achim." So this brother, we'll call him Shimon, gave chalitza to the wife of Reuven, and then he married her. And now the question is, do we recognize that marriage such that now, if he dies without meaning Shimon, then she, his wife, who was originally the wife of Reuven, falls for Yibam to the other brothers, and the Brisa says, Tzricha chalitza min ha'achim. Bishlei Melididi, says Rabbi Yochanan, that makes a lot of sense according to me, the Amina Chayvei Lavin, and therefore there's Tfisas Kedushin and Chayvei Lavin, because as far as the relation between the Chalutza and the other brothers, Rabbi Yochanan insists it's only Chayvei Lavin, Hainu de Tzricha chalitza min ha'achim. And therefore we're going to assume that since the marriage between Shimon and Ashes Reuven after Chalitza was a valid marriage, although it was the Isur, because Kedushin Tosim Chayvei Lavin, therefore when Shimon dies, the brothers have to give Chalitza. El Didaf, according to you, that you hold that as far as all the other brothers are concerned. There's an Isur Kares only as far as the Choletz himself. There's an Isur Lab, is a Mai Tzricha Chalitza. How could a man remarry his Chalutza? It's a case of Chayvei Krisa. Now, even though Reish Lakish would admit that he could remarry the Chalutz, because as far as the Chalutz is concerned, the Choletz is reduced to the level of Chayvei Lavin, but nevertheless, she cannot fall for Yibam to the brothers, meaning to Levi, because she's a Chiv Kares as far as Levi is concerned. And the reason for that is because Reish Lakish holds that after Shimon gave Chalitza, Igloi Milsa Mafreya, that she, the wife of Reuven, never fell for Yibum to the other brothers, and therefore she has a status of an Erev of a Kares of Eishes Ha. And now we can pick up Rav Ashi on Daf Yud Aleph Amid Aleph. Rav Ashi Sover Lo Kireish Lakish Umitaritz Lo Kirabi Shimon. So that Rav Ashi is going to defend Rabbi Shimon against the onslaught, the contradiction from this brisa, to explain why the brothers of the Choletz, that means Levi in this case, would have to give Chalitza when this woman, according to Reish Lakish, is an Eishes Ha. And here we're going to introduce Rabbi Shimon. Okay, now let's go over Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon is the Bar Plukta. I don't know how you say that in English, the Bar Plukta, the one who argues, but there should be one word for that, against the Chachamim with regard to Achiv Shalohaya Ba'olam. Because the Torah says, Ki Yeshu Achim Yachtom, and there's only a mitzvah of Yibum if there's an overlap between the two brothers. If a brother is born after the death of his father, if a brother is born after the death of his older brother, then there's no din of Yibum. And on this category called Achiv Shalohai Ba'olam, we have a debate between Rabbi Shimon and the Chacham. What's the case? Reuven and Shimon are alive together. Reuven dies without children, and now Shimon is miyavim Eishes Reuven. And then Levi is born. Shimon dies without children, and here we have a machlokas between Chachamim and Reb Shimon. According to Chachamim, there is an Isra on Levi of Eishes Ach. Why? Because this woman was originally married to Reuven. And Levi was not alive at the time of the death of Reuven. Therefore, the relationship between Levi and Eishes Reuven at the time of the death of Reuven is that of Eishes Achim Shelo B'Makom Mitzvah, because Levi did not share any moment of time alive together with Reuven, so that Levi, as far as Eishes Reuven is concerned, is Shelo B'Makom Mitzvah, he's Achim Shelo B'Olam, and that generates an Isur of Eishes Ach. Rabbi Shimon, on the other hand, allows Levi to be miyabem, the wife of Shimon, who was once the wife of Reuven, because at the moment that Levi was born, she was already Eishes Shimon. And the Ishus between this woman, who was once upon a time Eishes Reuven, and Shimon, who married her, is such that the Ishus to Reuven is completely neutralized. It is completely undermined, as if it didn't exist. And therefore, since Levi was alive at the time of Shimon, and Shimon died, now Eishes Shimon falls for Yibum to Levi. Is that clear so far? Okay. Now, John has a copy of the Masifta, so we're on Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, and there's a paragraph that starts below Nechlak, next to the last paragraph on the right column. Below Nechlak, Rabbi Shimon al Chachamim, El Bi Ofen HaAmur, which means that Levi was born after the death of Reuven, but before the death of Shimon. Avol Modehu Shemnolad Levi li'achar misas Reuven, v'rak achar kach yibem osa Shimon, eina misyabem es Levi. So again, the unique shita of Reb Shimon is because Levi was born post the marriage between Shimon and Eishes Reuven. But if Levi was born after the death of Reuven, but before Shimon was miyabem Eishes Reuven, then even Reb Shimon would agree that Eina misyabem es Levi after the death of Shimon, because at the moment that Levi was born, the Zika between this woman and Reuven was still active because it generated a chiyuv yibum, and Shimon has not yet implemented yibum. And here we apply the principle that whole v'nesrala b'nefila rishona Reuven mishum shelo haya b'olam harehi asur alav olamis. Once the Isur of Eishes Ach was chal, so if Levi is born after Shimon was Miyavim Eishes Reuven, then at the moment that Levi was born, the Zika to Reuven is gone. So there was never a moment that this woman was prohibited to him as an Eishesach except through Shimon, and now Shimon dies and is Yibum. However, if Levi is born and the Yibum has not yet taken, the Yibum of Shimon, Eishes Reuven, has not yet taken place, then at that moment, the Zika to Reuven is still active. That generates an Isur of Eishes Achiv Shaloy Lamo. And once that Isur is Chal, even if later Shimon is Miyavim, then Shimon dies, we cannot get rid of that Isur. Rav Ashi Savar L'Greish Lakish, Umetaritz La Ki Rabbi Shimon. Let's see how we can interpret the brisa that was quoted by Rabbi Yochanan on the previous Amud in the light of Rabbi Shimon. Acholetz liyavimto v'chazar v'kitsha. Right? So Shimon gave chalitza, Teishes Reuven, and now he marries her. Now Shimon dies. Why? Man achim hayiludim. Okay, and we're going to introduce Rabbi Shimon. What happens? Levi is born after Shimon gave chalitza. Let me add another point. Not only did Shimon give chalitza, but he married her. See, it's a little different than the case of Rabbi Shimon, because Rabbi Shimon's classic case is where Shimon was miyavim Eishes Reuven, and then Levi was born. Here's a case where Shimon deferred, or shall I say, rejected Yibum, and instead he took the option of Chalitza. Now, if there's Chalitza, how is that going to undermine the Zika of Reuven? So the Gemara adds that Shimon married Eishes Reuven, which he wasn't allowed to do. The Torah recognizes that marriage, and that marriage now will replace the Ishus to Reuven, so that now, if subsequent to that marriage of Shimon to Eishes Reuven, Levi is born, Levi comes onto the scene, and the marriage, the Ishus relation to Reuven is history. It's gone. So that's what he calls Achim HaYiludim Shenoldu Li'achar Shecholza Vizkadsha Li'echad Min HaAchim. He gives here a whole scenario. I don't know right now if we need that for our purposes. We'll see whether we have to go through that whole long thing with all these complicated diagrams. All right. So I'm assuming you have paid gift. Okay, then? Oh, so wait a minute. I keep reminding myself that we need more of an introduction. Let's go back one more time to Daf Yudam and Beis. And we're going to have a sugya of Rav Sheshes. So again, Rabbi Yochanan raised an objection from a brisa. So Reish Lakish says to Rabbi Yochanan, Uletamech. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up before the end of Yudam and Beis. Amos Sefer. So in the Sefer, there was Chalitza, Shimon was Choletz, but he didn't marry. Omar Echem Menachem B'Kitsha. And now one of the other brothers, not Shimon, but Levi, was Makadesh Eshes Ruvain. Ela Olav Klum. Ela Olav Klum. He says, Eina Tzricha Imenu Get. Oh, that sounds like Reish Lakish, right? According to you, Rabbi Yochanan, that the Isser of Chayve Lavin that applies to the Cholitz applies uniformly to all the other brothers. Zamai Ein Olav Klum. That Kedushin is valid because Kedushin Tosim Chayve Lavin. Over Rav Sheshes, Seifa Son, Rabbi Akiva, the Omar, Ein Kedushin Tosim Chayve Lavin. L'divrei Rabbi Akiva, Ein Lo Olav Klum, Ein Lo Olav Klum. Wait a second. Oh, I'm sorry, I left out the word the listening. The listening, the Rabbi Akiva, Ein Lo Olav Klum. What's the most kasha? It says Hacholetz Liavinto. Chazar Bekitcha. Umeis. What happened? So the Choletz was Chazar Bekitcha. Litzah ben Achim. So at that point he should have said, "Well, Rabbi Akiva, Ein Lo Olav Klum." Toma Keren Ora. L'shitas HaRambam, Ein Isur Chalutza, Elami Divrei Sof. That's the unique sheet of the Rambam. Alo Af Rabbi Akiva, Tosim Ba Kedushin, Kavanas, Rav Sheshes L'shitas Rabbi Akiva, and no say Krovas Chalutz. Okay, so we mentioned this yesterday. Man Achim. I didn't have my Gemara here yesterday, so I didn't write the. Achim Yeludim, Keman Kerb Shim. Midivei Rashi v'Tosfos Ola, Shlo Niskekes HaChalutza, Elo Lo Nolodim Li'achar Kiddushay HaCholot, V'chein Kosvu Harashva Ve'ir. What happened over here? The Achanolad was born after two things happened. Number one, Shimon was Choletz, and number two, Shimon was Makadesh. All that took place before the Leda of Levi. And therefore, according to Shimon, she falls for Yibum, to Levi, because the original Ishus of Ruvain was replaced, supplanted by that of Shimon. However, the Meiri says, let's wedge the birth of Levi in between Chalitza and Kedushin. What does that mean? That Chalitza has the same status as Yibum in this context, meaning Chalitza, no less than Yibum, is Mafkia Zika, such that now, if post Chalitza Levi is born, then we can activate Rabbi Shimon's principle that she falls for Yibum. Well, again, later Shimon marries her, but I'm saying the Chalitza of Shimon completely undermines and neutralizes the the Zika, the issues of Reuven. So why is it that all the other Rishonim insist that the Kedusha took place before the Leda of Levi? Kasha Komitzaris Ula, Inyan Motza Beheter, who should be boldly Olam, Kfar Paska, Zika, Kfar Ena, Shas, Nefila, Yeini Bechlal, Ho, Vanessa, Shas, Nefila, Olam, Emabe, Nolda, Kodem Kedusha, Liacha Kedusha, Hello, Hefkia, Zikasa, Hafkas, Chalitza, Tluya, Zika, Tluya, Bechalitza. I think he's asking our question. I mean, again, he asks it better than we did, but I think we asked. And why do we have to wait and postpone the Leda of Levi until after Shimon was Makadesh H's Ruvain? What do we need that for? Once he does Chalitza, that's Mafkia the Zika to Ruvain, and therefore Reb Shimon's principle will apply, and Levi is a potential Yavam. So now he quotes the Stipler, the Kilos Yaakov, who's going to try to explain those Rishonim. And I'm not sure exactly why he mentions the Rash and the Ritva. I mean, before we said it was Rashi and Tosfos. She came, Shitas Arash B'Lahalon. Now, again, you have to know everything to know anything. Let's see if we can somehow plow through this. Shemiyad b'shas nefila, hoka iser eshesach legamre. V'af im li'achar mikan hoka zikosa, ena choseres v'neseres v'isur zeh. So let's just think what happens here. The wife of Reuven falls for Yibum, and that Yibum now is Mafkia Ish Iser Eshes Ah. But now Shimon gave Chalitza to Eshes Reuven. At that moment, Poka Zikasa. Says the Rashba, the Iser Eshes Ach, once it was subject to a Eten, it's not Chose V'niyah. Yeah, but that makes sense with regard to Shimon. Levi was not alive. Right? Levi was born after Reuven's death. Not sure how this is going to apply. Oh, let's see. The Shitas are Ritva. Mashalo Hitir, Rabbi Shimon Benolad of the Sof Ibn. Ela B'Yivim Ulebesof Nolad Mispire B'Pshitus. Shekanim Nolad Kodem Ayibum Lo Mitza'ah Be'etem. Shari Ada Yibum Yeshala Adayin Iser Eshes Ach. Lo hutar isu zeh, elo machmas zikosal, eli achim anoladim, she'enim b'chlal zika, lo hutra. Rak al yidei yibum poka isu gam, af li achim shloya b'chlal zika. Lefi zeh, gam b'cholatz, u'besof nolad yesh lahatish, ke gam Chalitza matira iser eshes ach legamre legabe acholetz af shekvar ein bo zika. Shenolad ach, areu nigrar achar tzad heter zeh, shemotze etzel hayovam. So according to the Ritva, Rabbi Shimon requires Yibem Lubasof Nola. But in a case of Nola Lubasof Yibem, Lo Matzo Behet. Lo Matzo Behet. Because until Yibum, she's Ashes Ach. And since Levi was born after Reuben's death, so there's no heter on that Zika of Ashes Ach. Therefore, even according to Reb Shimon, there would be no Yibum. Alkain. What's this Alkain over here? Li'achim anolodim ein b'chal zik lo hutra. Not sure I understand the language of Eina B'chlal Zika. I would have said She'eina B'chlal Yibum. That's it. V'rak al yidei Yibum poka isu legamre, which means that in the case of Rav Shimon, Levi was born after Shimon was miyavim. Afli achim shelo choyu b'chlal Zika. So in any event, he has a slightly different formulation than what I would have formulated, but his rule of thumb is that to be matir the Isser Eshes Ach, you have to be B'chlal Zika. So therefore, in a case where Levi was born after Reuven's death, and Levi is not B'chlal Zika, therefore you cannot be matir the Isser Eshes Ach. And even Reb Shimon agrees. If on the other hand, Shimon was miyabim before the Leda of Levi, then you can be mafkia the Isser Eshes Ach, even for the Achim that were not part of the Zikas Ibru. Why is that? So again, I'm going to assume, which is what we've been saying over and over again, that through the Yibum of Shimon, the Zika of Reuven is completely uprooted. I don't know if he's saying that. I know for some reason it doesn't say it in the text, but I think that's what you have to say over here. So again, if Shimon has not yet been miyabim Eshes Reuven, then the Zika of Reuven could only be niteres for those who are b'chlal Zika. But Levi was born after the death of Reuven is not included in the Zika because of Yeshu Achim Yachto, and therefore there's no matir on that Zika. Then we're going to assume, again, he doesn't say this, that in event that Shimon was Miyabim before Levi was born, then Shimon's Yibum replaces the Zika of Reuven. The Ayidei Yibum Poka Isul Gamri Afli Achim Shlo Hoye B'Chlal Azik. Ulefi Zeh Gam B'Cholatz. Now we have a different scenario. Shimon was not Miyabim, but he was Choletz. Ulebesof Nolad Yesh Lahati. It's once again the Chalitza removes the Zika. Became Gam HaChalitza Matira Iser Eishes Ach Legamre Legabe HaCholetz Af Shekvar Ein Bo Zika. Well, what does that mean? Gam HaChalitza Matira Iser Eishes Ach Legamre Legabe HaCholetz. Then it's replaced by a separate Iser Chalitza. Af Shekvar Ein Bo Zika. What does that mean? Af Shekvar Ein Bo Zika. I mean, is he saying that the Chalitza removes the Zika? If that's what he's saying, then okay, Shkaya, Nicha. But the language is so flowery here. Gama Chalitza Matira Eish Tzach Legam Legabe HaCholetz Af Shekvar Ein Bo Zika. I think what he's saying is that if you need to be B'chlal Zika in order to be Matir Yisrael Ach, then L'chora one could argue that even after Chalitza, there should be an Yisrael Ach because you're no longer included in the Zika. The Chalitza removes you from the Zika. And paradoxically, that should generate an Yisrael Ach. And yet, the Chalitza is Matir Yisrael Ach, such that even after Chalitza, there's no Iser Eishes Ach, it's only an Iser Lav, even though there's no longer a Zika. I think, again, it sounds like he's saying Ein Bo Zika to be Matir the Iser Eishes Ach. I don't know if you read it the same way I do. Ukshenolad Ach Areu Nigrar Achar Tzad Heter Zeh Shemotza Eitzel HaYavam. In other words, if there was a heter that removes in a permanent way the Iser Eishes Ach to the Yavam, to the Choletz, and that means even though he's removed himself from the Zika, but the Iser Eishes Ach is still gone, even though he's not B'chlal Zika, and I thought that would mean Poka Zika. So that's going to happen the moment that there is Chalitza. In other words, he's learning Naya Halachi. He's saying that the Choletz, the Choletz by implementing Chalitza sets up a heter on the Eishes Ach, on the Erev of Eishes Ach, through his Chalitza. Because we should have reactivated the Erev of Eishes Ach as a result of the fact that the Choletz is no longer included in the Zika. It's the Zika that removed the Iser Eishes Ach, and with Chalitza you've removed the Zika, therefore the Iser Eishes Ach should be Choser V'Niyar, but no, there's a new halacha here that Chalitza is Matir Eishes Ach, And that's for the brother who did the chalitza. But now we're saying that matir is chal even for the other brothers. Like, for example, Levi, if he's born after the chalitza, he's born into that heter. He too can dip in and enjoy the benefit of that heter, that chalitza, despite the fact that it takes you out of the zikas ibum and therefore it should have generated Eishesach, but no, the chalitza is matir Eishesach, because the Torah says, imlo yivne, that he's only in violation of Allah, the cholitz. So that means that the Yisur Eishesach was removed vis-a-vis the cholitz, and therefore when this third brother, we'll call Levi, is born, he's already born into a situation where there was a removal of the Yisur Eishesach. And according to the Ritva, there's no need to say that Shimon was Makadish her before Levi's birth. Avol Shitas Rashba Adayin Tzarech Bir. Madua Oser Rabbi Shimon bin Nolad Ulebasof Yibem Alo Gam B'Chai Gavne Yesh Lo Leichoshev Ke Ba Umotza Vehet. Why? Again, he's telling us, Rebbe Chanan, that this is Ba Umotza Vehet. Why? He's actually Haybolam. What do you mean by a heter? What's the heter? He's not at all in the parsha of Yibum. So what heter does he have to be mad to these faces? Miyad b'nefilasa me'arishon hokan mimena iser eishes achol gamre afim tisbatel zikosa. The way I understand it, but again, when I say understand it, I mean on a superficial level, the mechanics of it, is the Rashba as a wild sheep. And the Rashba is saying that with Nefila L'Yibum, the Yisrael Shesach is gone, never to be resurrected from the dead. And therefore, when Levi is born, there is no Yisrael Shesach. I mean, it's counterintuitive. I would have told you that the Yisrael Shesach could be removed vis-a-vis the Miyamer. But what does that have to do with Levi? He's saying the Rashba, no, that the Nefila for Yibum removes the Yisrael Shesach, period. Now, I would have said just the opposite. The Nefila Yibum is that which keeps the marriage relationship, so to speak, the issues to Reuben alive and active. But he's saying no. The Nefila for Yibum removes the Yisrael Shesach. And that's going to be true for any other brother who's born. It came miyad b'nefilasa me'arishon. Rishon here means Reuven. Poka mimena Yisrael Shesach legamre. The af im tisbatel zikosa. What does that mean? Af im tisbatel zikosa. Yeah, I guess he means af im tisbatel zikosa means even after Yibum or Chalitza, the Yisrael Shesach will not be choser v'niyah. In Ken Yesh Latira, Gamle Achim, meaning I guess we alluded, Shalohoy Bichlal Azika Rishona. Muchrach Miseh, Shegeder Ba Umotza Beheter, Ubetarte. Gam Shaloye Ba Yisrael Shesach. Bishas Leidoso. The Gam Shetia kfar b'shus achi hames. L'shitaso muchrach shedavka b'cholatz v'kidesh yakach nolad mater of Shimon Yeludin. Al nolad achar chalitza ein ze begetter motzo beheter l'fi shadayin eino b'shus ha'af. So גם שתהיה כפר ברשוס אחי המס. So again, what's Reb Shimon's shita now? Reb Shimon holds that there will be yibum if Levi is born after Shimon was miyabem, and now we're adding another condition that Shimon was not only miyabem or choles, but he was also makadish. And then we could say motza behet. So look, the only thing I get out of this, but I'm sure there's much more to it, is that when Rabbi Shimon holds that Levi could be miyabem eshes Shimon, that's only because of something called motza behet. And according to the Rashba, I don't understand exactly the calculation, but according to the mathematics here, it comes out that the Rashba could only apply the principle of matzah be'eter if she's in the reshus of the ach. It's not enough to say that there was an afila for yibum to the ach, and somehow that nefila for yibum is not enough to remove the Iser Ashes Ach, as far as the other brothers are concerned, until this Yavam is Miyabem or Cholitz. Once that happens, then she's considered Bershus Shimon, and that replaces the Zika Terut. Okay, let's see if we can make some progress now. Our sugya on Daf Yud Beis Amid Beis, right? Did we turn to Yud Gimel? I forget. We did. So can you point out where we got to? Because just the very top. Okay. Rav Zvid Amar. So once again, we have in the Masifta an introduction to Rav Zvid. He says, "Liolam leidas habana mitzad atzma eino magdila es habas." And Rav Zvid is not going to accept the principle that we established on the previous Amud of Bonim Hareim Kisimon. But Shlosha Zmanim Yeshpa. Aleph, Ad Yud Aleph Shon B'Yom Echad, Beis B'Yom Yud Aleph B'Yom Ad Yud Beis, and Gimel Yacha Yud Beis. Fine. Toch HaZman HaEmtzeh, from 11 to 12, U'Kamoli Achar Zman. It's exactly the same as if she was 12. What does that mean? In a via bow during that period of time, Simonim, Harehi Nases Gedol. So she has to see Simonim during that, I'll call it the 12th year of her life, meaning from 11 to 12. And only if she sees Simonim does she become a Gdol. And that's called Toch HaZman Kiliachar Zman. Ein Bonim below Simonim. So it's not the fact that she gave birth during that 12th year that makes her to Gdola. The fact that she gave birth indicates that she has Simon. It creates a new chazak, a new reality. So it's called chazaka she hevia Simon. And he adds Kfar Mishashes Av. You don't have to wait until she gives birth. She effectually has Simonim from the moment of Ibur because of this principle called Ein Bonim Below Simon. If she gives birth, then there's a chazaka that she has Simon. And therefore, there's no such thing as a chamoso mima'enes, because chamoso means that she gave birth, and then by definition, she's already a gedola, because we assume she had Simon. So the Gemara says, what's this whole business that you assume she has Simon? The nifta. Just check out if she has Simon. And the Gemara answers something radical, that even if we don't find Simonim, she has Simonim. Why? Chayshin and Shema, Nosh. So we're going to assume that the hairs fell out, And now he quotes a Gemara on Daf Mem Vav. The Gemara records Machlokes Shin Rav Papa and Rav Papi. What's the case? She's already 12, and they didn't find Simonim. And Rav Papi says, maybe we should assume that she had Simonim and they fell. And Rav Papa says, no, we're not going to assume that she had Simonim. She has the status of a Ketana. So the Gemara says, if you go like Rav Papi, that we're afraid that maybe Simonim fell, our hairs fell off, that's okay. And then we can explain Rav Zvid that if she gave birth, and even though we didn't find Simonim, we assume there was Simonim, they fell. Elamandi Amar, according to Rav Papa, who holds Ein Chosheshin, we never assume that she had Simonim and they fell, is Michael and Meimar. Right? If we're going to check this woman, I mean, she's now a mother-in-law already, because she gave birth, and you don't find Simonim, she should still be a Ketana, because Rabbi Zera was of the opinion that by virtue of the fact that she gave birth, that's proof positive that she has Simonim. But now we checked her out, she doesn't have Simonim. That means she's still a Ketana, she could be Mema'enes. So why does the Mishnah say that there's no such thing as Chamosa Mema'enes? Afilu lemandi omein chosheshin mishum tsar leida chashinon. Since she went through the tormentous process of childbirth, then we can assume that her simonim fell. She lost her simonim during childbirth. Okay, the Mishnah says, Ketzad potros soros sehen. Oisabito or achas mikol arayis elu v'suas liacha v'lo isha peres umeis shem shebito ptura kach soras bito ptura. Holchot soras bito v'nosa liachiv sheni v'lo isha peres umeis shem soras bito ptura gas skam soras sora ptura. And the source for the Ptur of Tzara is from the pasuk Isha el achosa lo tikach litzra legalos erva lev b'chayim. So we have the word oleha, and we derive from the Gzeira Shava that just like it says in the parsha of Yibum Yevamot Yavo Oleha, so too the Oleha in the parsha of Achos Isha is talking about Yibum. And since it says Litzrar, we derive that the Torah prohibits not only her, but also Hatzaros. Now, what about Tsaras Tsara? What's the source for that? Minani Mili. Rav Yehuda, the Omakra Litzrar v'lo Lotzur. In other words, there's an extra ratio over here. Could have said Lotzur. What's Lotzrar? Atoribset Soros Harbe. That's a ribui that Tsaras Tsara has the same status as Tsara. And then I would assume that goes on and on and on. Rav Ashi Omar Svarahi. In other words, once we derive from Litzvar that the Torah prohibits the Tsara, I don't need a special Yalfusa to derive Tsaras Tsara. I can derive from Svara. What is this Svara? Tsara my kaima sira. The bimkom erva kaima. Or Saranami Bimkom Erva Kaim. What is Bimkom Erva Kaim? He writes here, Omedes he Bimkom Erva le Aser Kamosa Beibu. What does that mean? I don't see any footnotes. You have anything in your Gemara here on the words Bimkom Erva Kaima? See if Rachi's here. Medis he b'mokom erva they aser most of the. Oh, I think I understand. He's saying like this, that once we have a derivation of tsara, then what the Torah is telling us is that the tsara of an erva is like the erva herself. Once we know that, then we can take logically the next step and say that tsara is also like the tsara. Why? Because if the Torah equates the tsara with the erva, then the Torah is going to say that now the tsara is an erva. If the Torah is saying that now we define the tsara as an erva, is memela the tsara is the tsara's erva. That's what I think he's saying. I'd be curious to know, in the light of Rav Ashi, why Rav Yehuda did not accept this svara. Let's just see if he mentions. He has a slightly different problem. He wants to know, why not just simply say, to explain Tsaras Tsara, why not simply say that Tsaras Erva, once she's excluded from Yibam, she becomes Eishes Ach. And now the tzara is the tzara of an erev of Eishesach. And he says that the language of Rav Ashi, b'mokom erev kaima, right? What is b'mokom erev kaima? That now the tzara has the same status as the erev, but he's not saying, Rav Ashi, that she's an Eishes Ach. Right? You have to deher it, like when you listen to the words b'mokom erev kaima, he's not talking about Eishes Ach. He doesn't mention a word about Eishes Ach. Elamuchach midvarav shatzara b'mokom erev rishona he omedes. I know shechalba shem bito. Interesting. Rabbi Elchanan is going very far. He's saying chalba shem bito le'inyan zikas yibu. So it's not Eishes Ach, but it's rather bito, or whatever the erev is. That's pretty wild, no? To say that the tzara is like becomes an erev of bito. I mean, she's not bito. You have to be really abstract for this. The im shem zeh, with this name of bito, he poteres es tzaros. So asor nami b'mokom erev kaim. He doesn't mention any word about Eishes Ach. The osa siba sheyesh bebito lafkia zik yesh nigam b'tzoras bito. Siba azos nisheres boli olam gam b'nefil shmir. Oz he p'tura mishum tzor. But for lo mishum Eishes Ach, is he going to tell me why not? Even shahoyset tzoras bito sha'achas ari can bito liolam. Rabbi Yehuda, ha'erva poteres es tzorosa, and be'inan kra, shegam litzoras erva, koach liftar es tzorosa. Right. We know that an erva patus up a tzara. How do we know that a tzara has that same status to pater up hartzar? Rav Ashi, ein ha'erva poteres es tzarasa, el shem tzaras erva, uptur mitzad atzma. Me'achar sheyesh tzara atzma, in erva atzmi, le'inyan p'tur yibum, is memela sarasa, he can saras erva mamish. Yachboch chalsh. So both I can only tell you what it says, but I can't tell you what it doesn't say. He doesn't address our problem. Why not just say that since the Torah is machadish that the tzara of an erva doesn't fall for yibum, and maybe she becomes Eishes Ach. She was married to the late brother. So how could the Yavam marry the wife of his late brother? She's not an erva per se, but now she becomes Eishes Ach. I don't know why. Unless you go with that Rashi that we saw earlier today, that once there was an Nefila for Yibum, the Nefila for Yibum removes in an absolute way the erva of Eishes Ach. Which we didn't understand then, so I don't understand it now. The Mishnah says, Ketzad, we have another 2 minutes, Ketzad and Mesu Haim, Sorasein Mutaros, Oisa Bito Achas Mikol Arayas Elu Nesuas Liachiv, Velo Ishacheres, Mesa Bito, on this Garsha, Yakaf Mesa Achiv, Sarasa Muteres. So in other words, if the deceased had died after Gerushin, or Nebuch after his Erev died, so then at the time of his death, his other wife will fall for Yibum. That makes a lot of sense, right? Because in order to be a tsar of an Erva, you have to have fallen for Yibum together with the Erva. But here the Erva was already divorced, or she had died before the Misa of the Ach. And he writes here, Hagmar Dona Ha'imat Sora Muteres Gam Kishahoisa Nisua Li Achiv Kishinasa Esa Erva. That's what we have. Make a note of where we got up to. The Afilu. Where's the Afilu? Here it is. Afilu. It's about 12 lines down from the top.